Hi guys, This story is all about what if Naruto was a walking corpse. 10 years ago, Naruto died in the fight against Orochimaru. At least, that's what everyone was told. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard! Chapter 5 of Enemies. Sakura quickly made her way into the meeting room. She had just woken up when Ino had knocked on her door, telling her the Hokage had called an emergency meeting. With a frown, Sakura had rushed to get ready. Emergency meetings didn't usually involve Chunin. Jonin and Umbu often went while the Chunin continued their normal duties around the village. When she entered the meeting hall, it was full of shinobi, all of whom were talking amongst themselves. Spotting Ino, Lee, and Choji, she made her way through the crowd. With quick hellos she asked, "So what's going on?" They shrugged. "No idea," Ino said. Kiba, Hinata, and Shino joined them, neither of them having any more of a clue about the reason for the meeting than they did. "Ohio, everyone," a voice said. They turned to see an Umbu standing behind them. The mask was the face of a rabbit, two red whiskers painted along the cheeks. They recognized the Umbu immediately since her hood was down and two buns of black hair were visible near the top of her head. "Hey, Ten," Lee said, happy to see his old teammate. Ten pulled her mask off and smiled at them with sparkling gray eyes. As Ten moved closer, they could see another Umbu behind her. His uniform was clearly visible, for he didn't have his robes on. Long black hair flowed from behind his mask, which was the shape of a bird. "Ohio, Niji-Nizan," Hinata said, bowing in greeting. Niji nodded at her. "Do you guys know what's going on?" Kiba asked the Umbu. "No," Ten said, shaking her head. "Sasuke called us in, but we haven't been told anything." "Look!" A booming voice called. "It's my old students, together again." "Guy-sensei," Lee said excitedly as the green-clad Jonin strolled over to them. Asuma and Kurenai followed him, warmly greeting their former students as well. "Kakashi, my rival," Guy called loudly to the silver-haired Jonin that stood across the room. "Come see the young ones." Everyone was looking at their large group now, taking in the odd mixture of Chunin, Jonin, and Umbu. Kakashi walked over to them, his eye narrowed into a smile as a greeting. They all fell into an easy banter until the Hokage entered the room and a hush fell. Tsunade made her way to the podium at the front of the room and all the shinobi moved in behind her as she passed. The crowd reparted quickly as the Umbu captain strode in after her, fully robed. He took his seat in the front of the room near the Hokage's advisors, Hamura, Koharu, and Shizune. The group of friends was surprised to see Shikamaru enter after Sasuke, walking next to a masked man. He leaned in, saying something to the man, who nodded. Shikamaru then walked further into the crowd and stood next to Choji. The man stayed in the back, leaning casually against the wall. Those who were in the pub the night before all gaped at Shikamaru, who stared straight ahead, not meeting anyone's gaze. "Is that the guy?" Kiba whispered to Sakura. She nodded. Akamaru whined at Kiba's feet and Kiba reached down, absently patting the dog's head. Tsunade spoke and any thoughts of the masked man were pushed aside. Information regarding the Akatsuki has been brought to light. For the Chunin here, I know that you weren't aware of Akatsuki's return, however we've deemed it necessary that you are all informed of the details. We are now definite that Akatsuki is heading towards Konoha. No one spoke, but there was a collective noise of uncomfortable shifting from the Chunin, who had not been aware that such a threat existed. With a quick glance behind her, Sakura noticed that the masked man hadn't moved from his position against the wall and he didn't seem surprised at all. Wouldn't this be new information for him? He had said he was a Chunin. Tsunade continued. As they come towards Konoha, they are attacking other villages of the Fire Country. We know where they will strike next. The reason I've called you all here is that we plan to send a large group of shinobi to intercept Akatsuki at their next target. This is a dangerous mission because we do not know their numbers or have a clear idea of their strength. We also have reason to believe they are being led by Orochimaru. A murmur went up through the crowd and Tsunade held up a hand to quiet them. Sakura immediately looked to Sasuke for some type of reaction, but with his mask on she could only look at his body language and he hadn't even tensed when Tsunade had made the announcement. He must have already known. There are some of you, Tsunade said. I will be asking specifically to go. Otherwise, we are asking for volunteers. This is an A-class mission, so no chunins will be forced to go. If you would like to volunteer, please see Hamura, Koharu, or Shizune. Because we cannot afford to leave Konoha unprotected, it is possible you'll be asked to remain here. Discuss among yourselves, but if you plan to volunteer, please do so before you leave. With that, the Hokage stepped down from the podium and made her way into the crowd, stopping to talk to certain jounin as she went. A buzz began immediately. Kiba pushed his way over to Shikamaru and the others gathered around the ponytailed man as well. Shikamaru, what the hell's going on? Kiba asked. Shikamaru rolled his eyes, sighing. Don't you listen, Kiba? Tsunade-sama just explained it all. Not that, Kiba said. What happened last night? And who's that guy? He said, jabbing his thumb over his shoulder at the masked man who remained quietly in the back of the room. Everyone was waiting for Shikamaru's response, even Niji, Tenten, and Shino, who hadn't been at the pub the night before, and the older jounin who really had no idea what had happened. Kiba nearly jumped out of his skin when a low voice spoke right next to him. Niji, Tenten, Sasuke said to his two Umbu. The Hokage has asked me to put together a squad of Umbu for this mission and I'd like you two to be on it. He didn't bother removing his mask, even around the group of people he'd known from childhood. Hi, Tenten said, and Niji inclined his head in an affirmative. Sasuke nodded and without a word to the rest of them he turned and walked away, disappearing back into the crowd. Nice to see you too, Uchiha, Kiba said. He turned to continue his interrogation of Shikamaru, but was interrupted again when Tsunade walked over. Kakashi, Guy, I'd like for the two of you to go on the mission. They nodded. Good, she said. Report to Shikamaru tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Shikamaru? Kakashi asked. Yes, he and Sasuke will be leading this mission. Sasuke is taking care of the Umbu and Shikamaru is commanding the jounin and any chunin that volunteer. Guy and Kakashi looked at one another as she moved away, telling Lee, Kiba, Shino, and Shoji that she wanted them on the mission. Do you suddenly feel extremely old? Guy asked. Kakashi nodded, glancing at their leader, who seemed to be watching his companions with little interest. In fact, one could say he looked bored. Sakura, Ino, and Hinata rejoined the group, having gone and volunteered. The room began to empty out as those who had volunteered and those who weren't planning to left. Ino looked over to where the masked man stood, arms folded and eyes closed as he leaned against the wall. I wonder if he's going to volunteer, she said to no one in particular. Kakashi-sensei, Sakura said to the silver-haired jounin, who stood near Guy. Do you know anything about that guy? Glancing in his direction, Kakashi was startled to see blue eyes meet his gaze, but made no outward indication of his surprise. No, Sakura, I'm just as in the dark as you are. He held eye contact with the man for a moment, until the blue eyes closed once again. Everyone turned to Shikamaru, whose eyes were half-lidded and almost looked as though he was going to attempt sleeping standing up. What? He asked when he noticed all the eyes on him. You were talking to him, Ino said. Do you know who he is? Shikamaru shrugged. We've met. Everyone, including the older generation of jounin, who were equally as curious about the stranger, was about to launch into questions when Sasuke walked back up to the group. Ready? Sasuke asked flatly, as if he really didn't care one way or the other. There was a bit of confusion at the question since, 1. Sasuke rarely spoke to any of them, and 2. His mask prevented them from seeing where exactly his question was directed. Shikamaru put an end to the confusion by sighing and saying, "How troublesome," before following Sasuke over to the masked man. Pushing himself from the wall, he greeted them with a curt nod before the three of them left, completely ignoring the rest of them.
"Okay, seriously," Kiba said when they had departed. "What the hell is going on?" Akamaru barked. "What are you doing here, old man?" Naruto asked. They were bringing up the rear in a long line of shinobi. There were about 50 ninjas picked for the mission and they were making their way quickly towards the village Gamakichi had warned Naruto about. Naruto sighed, thinking about how much quicker he could have gotten there if he'd just gone himself. Jiraiya threw him an irritated look at the question. "I'm not one to miss an opportunity to kick Orochimaru's ass."
Naruto's eyes appeared thoughtful.
"I don't ever recall you kicking Orochimaru's ass.
In fact, every time I've seen you face him you've ended up as a human crater."
Jiraiya thwopped him on the head. "No respect."
Naruto's eyes crinkled in a grin, but the expression fell when he felt eyes on him again. Looking ahead to the middle of the line he saw a pair of pale, pupil-less eyes staring at him. When he met Hinata's gaze she blushed and turned quickly.
Naruto sighed. At least she hadn't been using Byakugan. Who knew what she would see?
Ever since the mission had begun people had been sneaking looks at him, as if watching him would help them figure out the mystery he presented. He'd caught everyone from Ino to Kakashi. He was pretty certain he'd even seen the stoic Shino watching him as well, but with the sunglasses it was difficult to tell.
"Popular, aren't we?" Jiraiya teased.
"If I had known the best way to get everyone's attention was to be as quiet and unobtrusive as possible, I wouldn't have tried being so annoying when I was a kid," Naruto said in exasperation.
Jiraiya laughed.
"It's the mask," he said.
"It adds to the mystery." Naruto shrugged. Sasuke suddenly appeared beside them.
He was wearing his armor and mask, his katana strapped across his back.
Blue eyes rolled as Sasuke fell into step with them. "I'm still here, Sasuke," Naruto said, obviously irritated. "I know," the Umbu replied.
This was not the first time Sasuke had checked up on him. Whether Sasuke was afraid he was going to run off or try and kill himself right there on the walk to the village, Naruto wasn't sure, but it was beginning to annoy him. "Stop playing mother hen and get back to your troops," Naruto snapped a little louder than he'd intended. The fox mask turned towards him, but Naruto had no idea what type of expression it hid. Finally, Sasuke grunted and disappeared, presumably returning to the head of the line with the rest of the Umbu. Those who could hear the conversation were wide-eyed. No one dared talk to the Umbu captain like that, not even those who had known him when he was younger. Kakashi and Guy, who had remained towards the back of the line, exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued even further. The metal roof tiles were cool under his hands when he leaned back, his weight on his arms as he stared up into the night sky. From his position on the roof of a bakery that was closed for the night, he could see several shinobi pacing the outskirts of the village on sentry duty, looking for any sign of Akatsuki. They'd arrived at the village just before sundown. The villagers had been surprised but cooperative, grateful for protection. They had heard what was happening in the other villages. Everything was quiet so far. The villagers and most of the shinobi were sleeping and resting for the battle that was likely to begin the next day. Naruto had managed to sneak away from the watchful eyes of Sasuke and Shikamaru. He and Sasuke hadn't actually been speaking since the day before, save for Naruto telling him to leave him alone several times throughout the journey to the village. When they'd returned to Sasuke's house after the meeting, Shikamaru and Sasuke spoke about strategies and Naruto went to the guest room to meditate. After Shikamaru had left, the entire house seemed filled with nearly tangible tension between Sasuke and Naruto. Sasuke had obviously not been prepared to find out Naruto valued his life at so little, and Naruto had not been prepared for Sasuke's angry reaction to this information. He heard feet land lightly on the shingles behind him.
Turning his head slightly, he watched as Gaino, he corrected when the man's face was illuminated by the moonlight. Lee walked over to him. Ah! Lee said softly when he could see Naruto. His hair and face were still covered, but he'd now become recognizable as the mysterious masked man. Sorry to disturb you, Lee said, drawing even with him. I saw a shadowy figure on the roof and thought I should check it out. It's okay, Naruto said, returning his gaze to the stars that twinkled brightly above them. My name's Rock Lee, the dark-haired man said, extending his hand down to him. Nice to meet you, Naruto said, grasping Lee's calloused palm, but not offering his name. If Lee noticed he hadn't been given a name, he made no comment. So, he said. How do you know Uchiha Sasuke? The Hokage is making me stay with him. It wasn't a lie. Lee nodded, looking up at the stars. I can't imagine he's much fun to live with, he said. Naruto shrugged, a small smile pulling at his hidden lips. He's definitely a broody bastard. Lee grinned down at him. He's always been like that, he said. Of course, he wasn't quite as bad before he cut himself off with a frown. Naruto looked up at him curiously. Before what? Well, he's never been quite the same since a friend of his died, Lee said sadly. Actually, none of us have. Konoha never seemed so quiet until he was gone. Naruto looked down at the roof tiles, his stomach turning with regret. His friends had missed him. He'd often wondered if that would be the case or if his absence would go mostly unnoticed, not affecting anyone's lives. How he wished he could speak to them again, the way he used to. Just be the careless, stupid person he once was, annoying his friends. He shook his head slightly. He had made the right decision. He was protecting these people, and to do that, they must not know he still existed. He had no regrets. Already he had spent too much time around them, any moment with him was a moment in danger, whether they knew it or not. His resolve strengthened. After this mission he'd leave, with or without Tsunade Baba's permission, or Sasuke's knowledge. Well, Lee said, breaking Naruto's train of thought. I should get back to sentry duty. Naruto sent him a nod and the green-clad man leapt from the roof, gracefully landing on the ground and making his way back through the village. It was a few moments before the presence Naruto had sensed while speaking with Lee decided to make himself known. Hiding yourself from your old friends, Naruto-kun? With a sigh, Naruto stood, turning to face the newcomer. Naruto grimaced as he took in the white-haired man's appearance. His skin was pulled tightly over his face, giving him an emaciated look. He no longer wore his glasses and his eyes bulged unnaturally from his face. The years have not been kind to you, Kabuto, Naruto said. Or, I suppose I should call you Orochimaru. Kabuto's face broke into a manic grin. Yes, Kabuto was kind enough to lend me his body when Sasuke-kun rebelled. Are you here to reclaim him? Naruto asked, crossing his arms over his chest. No, Orochimaru said. I thought he was the body I wanted, but I've since revised my opinion. Naruto watched him speak with a guarded expression. See, I always thought of you as a little Jiraiya, stupid and not very talented. He paused, waiting for Naruto to react, but continued when Naruto simply gazed at him flatly. But Jiraiya has proved that luck and persistence can make you strong. You, Naruto-kun, your luck was having Kyuubi sealed in you. Unlimited power at your fingertips. Naruto did raise an eyebrow at that. Orochimaru could not possibly be suggesting what he seemed to be suggesting. Uchiha Itachi had the right idea coming after you. Your stupidity made me overlook you before, but once I control your body, that particular weakness won't be a problem. And I'll have the power of Kyuubi to use as I please. Apparently, Naruto thought Orochimaru was suggesting exactly what he seemed to be suggesting. What makes you sure you can control Kyuubi's power? Naruto asked. Orochimaru laughed. Do you realize who you're talking to? Rolling his eyes, Naruto muttered, an overconfident bastard? Louder, he said, there's only one problem with this theory of yours. I would have to be willing. And I'm not. Orochimaru laughed again and Naruto grit his teeth at the irritating sound.
10 years ago, yes, you would have had to be willing.
But I've discovered a new jutsu since then. Now, you just have to be unconscious.
Naruto's eyes widened as Kabuto's mouth opened and Orochimaru's tongue flew from his mouth. He quickly dodged, but the tongue followed him. He had to use his full speed to avoid being hit. Dashing across the rooftop, he pulled out several shuriken, flinging them at Orochimaru, who leapt into the air to dodge. Naruto used this chance to get in close, avoiding the tongue. Chakra began to gather in his right palm. Oh no you don't, Orochimaru said, recognizing the technique. He retracted his tongue at a high speed, purposely slamming it into the back of Naruto's head. Stars burst in front of his eyes and Naruto fell to his knees in front of the snake-like man, the chakra in his hand disappearing. With a smirk, Orochimaru swiftly brought his knee up, catching Naruto hard in the jaw and sending him sprawling across the roof. Lowering his mask momentarily to spit out blood, Naruto shakily started to make his way to his feet. A kick to his ribs from Orochimaru sent him sliding along the roof tiles and dangerously close to the edge. He saw the tongue speeding towards him but was unable to dodge as it wrapped around his leg, pulling him upside down into the air. Lee felt a strong gathering of chakra and turned to see the masked man he'd just been speaking with, fighting with a strange man on the roof he'd just left. Calling to a nearby Chunin to inform Shikamaru and Sasuke, he and several sentries made their way quickly towards the fight. They arrived in time to see the masked man lifted into the air by the other's tongue, which was impossibly and disgustingly long. Lee watched as the man used his tongue to throw the masked man off the roof. He hit the ground painfully hard and rolled towards Lee before the momentum of the throw wore out and his limp body skidded to a stop. Running towards him, Lee dropped to a knee to make sure he was still alive. The man was bloodied and bruised on the small part of his face that he could see, and his arm was bent in a very unnatural way, presumably from the fall. He was unconscious, but alive. Get a medical, Nin, Lee told one of the sentries, who hurried away. 2 puffs of smoke announced the arrival of Sasuke and Shikamaru, who quickly took in the situation. As soon as he saw the masked man lying on the ground, Sasuke quickly kneeled next to him, across from Lee. Sasuke hadn't bothered to put his mask on and Lee was surprised at the worry splayed across the normally stoic man's face. Assured that he was still breathing, Sasuke stood, glaring angrily at the man on the roof. Ah, Sasuke-kun, the man said. Just in time to witness me take my new body. Sasuke's eyes grew wide when he recognized Orochimaru's voice as the white-haired man began making seals. He didn't know what to do to protect Naruto, but he'd be damned he'd let that snake take control of him the way he had been taken control of. But before Sasuke could do anything, Orochimaru stopped, opening his eyes and laughing. You're better than I gave you credit for, he said, looking at Naruto's still form. I'll do this next time I see you. And with that he had disappeared. Sasuke, Shikamaru, Lee and the 3 other sentries looked curiously at the unconscious man on the ground. Sasuke went back to kneel by Naruto's side. What did Orochimaru mean? Naruto seemed to pose no threat. With a poof, the sentry Lee had sent off appeared, Sakura with him. Her pink hair was sticking every which way, having come directly after being roused from sleep. She saw Sasuke kneeling next to the masked man and rushed to the injured man's side, shooing Sasuke away to get room to work. Quickly assessing the damage, she moved to use her chakra to begin healing and nearly screamed when her patient disappeared in a poof of smoke. They all stared at the empty spot in amazement. Don't waste your chakra, a voice said. Turning, they saw the masked man emerge from the shadow of the building the fight had taken place on, looking no more injured than when Lee had spoken to him. The replacement technique? Lee said in confusion. No, Sakura said, glancing at the space in front of her, which was devoid of any logs. She would have known if it was a normal fake. She had felt chakra in the clone in front of her. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Chapter 6, of Exposure. Who is this guy?
Sakura said angrily, pointing at Naruto, who was sitting at the head of a long rectangular table. After Orochimaru had disappeared, they had moved to the meeting room the inn had provided for them. Lee stood next to Sakura, a calming hand on her arm, looking curiously between Sasuke, who stood silently behind Naruto, for once having his umbu mask hanging from his hip instead of covering his face, and Shikamaru, who was sitting a few seats from Naruto, his cheek resting on his palm. Sakura continued. He said he's a Chunin, but he can hold a Kage Bunshin long enough that the clone appeared injured. That's incredibly difficult. How did he even learn the technique? It's forbidden. No Chunin should be able to perform it. Sakura, we did know a shinobi who could use Kage Bunshin as a genin, Lee reminded her, not noticing the other three men in the room shift subtly at his words. This is different, Lee. Naruto was trustworthy. Naruto didn't know whether to be pleased she thought so highly of him or offended that she didn't consider the current him trustworthy. It was bizarre to be praised and insulted in the same sentence. Silence had descended over the room. It was rare that Naruto was talked about, even among those he had been closest to. It was a wound that had never fully healed. There was also an unspoken agreement that the subject was never broached around Sasuke, and now Lee and Sakura were watching him warily for a reaction. Shikamaru might have been slightly worried himself if he hadn't known Naruto was sitting in front of Sasuke looking slightly puzzled at the sudden quiet. Shikamaru finally spoke. Sakura, he said. Tsunade, Jiraiya, Sasuke, and I fully trust him. There's no cause for alarm. Shikamaru, he knows a forbidden jutsu. Plus remember what Ino said dash. Can everyone stop talking about me as if I'm not sitting right here? Naruto interjected, eyebrows raised. Everyone turned to him. He was looking at Sakura. I told you I was technically a Chunin, he said. I've never taken the Jounin exam so I can't claim to be one, but my skills are likely at Jounin level. Then why didn't you tell us that up front? Sakura demanded. Because the way you and Ino talk it is impossible to get a word in edgewise. Naruto said in exasperation. It grew quiet for a moment as Naruto rolled his eyes and the other three men in the room awaited Sakura's response with bated breath. She did not take criticism well. Sure enough, who the hell do you think you are? She yelled, making to lunge for him. For his part, Naruto didn't even flinch. Lee managed to get a hold of her before she could get anywhere. Shikamaru sighed. Women were so troublesome. Sasuke chose to ignore Sakura. Well, at least we know for certain that Orochimaru's alive. Sakura quieted down. And what he's after, Shikamaru added, glancing at Naruto. Naruto stood. Are we done? I'm going to bed. Shikamaru appeared thoughtful, then he nodded. It was fast approaching dawn. The last thing he wanted was several of his most skillful companions ill-rested. Go ahead. Turning to the rest of the shinobi in the room he said, all of you should get some sleep as well. Orochimaru's nearby, battle could begin at any time. With one last glare at Naruto, Sakura left in a huff, Lee trailing after her after smiling at them. Sasuke watched as Naruto walked out without another word. With a quick goodbye to Shikamaru he trailed after him. Naruto had said he was going to bed but Sasuke knew that couldn't be true. And there were things they needed to talk about, the silent treatment had gone on long enough. Sasuke only gave a short knock of warning before walking into Naruto's room. It was furnished just as his own room down the hall was. A bed was in the center, with a nightstand next to it, one chair, and a set of dressers stood against the far wall. The room was dark and Sasuke almost thought that Naruto hadn't come back until he caught sight of the light in the corner where the bathroom door was slightly ajar. He removed his katana and set it near the door, his mask resting on the hilt. Naruto? He said, pushing the door open. Naruto's back was to the door and he was hunched over the sink. Sasuke heard him spit before he straightened, seemingly ignoring him. He wiped his mouth then took a drink from the glass of water in his hand,
sloshing it around his mouth with a grimace before leaning over and spitting again. This time Sasuke saw the red tint the water had to it as it disappeared into the sink. Naruto straightened again, not turning, but meeting Sasuke's gaze in the mirror that hung over the sink.
"Haven't you heard of knocking?" he said. "Are you hurt?" Sasuke asked, completely ignoring his question.
"I bit my tongue when Orochimaru kneed me in the jaw," Naruto said with a shrug, taking another mouthful of water.
"I thought that was a clone," Sasuke said.
"No," Naruto said after spitting again. "I didn't get a chance to Kage Bunshin until the bastard almost knocked me off the roof." He was so pleased with himself he didn't notice the real me slide down from the building. "You should have told Sakura you were hurt, she could have healed you." "And pulled down my mask, discovered who I am, faint, recover, and tell everyone within a 20-mile radius," Naruto said. "I'll take my chances with the glass of water. Besides, it'll be healed in a few hours anyway."
Sasuke grimaced at the overt mention of Kyuubi.
He backed out of the bathroom as Naruto made to exit, setting the cup on the sink as he did. Sasuke watched as he made his way to the bed, flopping down on his back and draping an arm over his eyes. "Oh, what I wouldn't give to sleep," he murmured, so low that Sasuke almost didn't catch it. The raven-haired man felt a wave of intense anger at the fox.
It wasn't fair that Naruto had to deal with this. No one should have to.
No wonder Naruto was thinking about
Naruto? Sasuke asked. "A weary was his reply. Sasuke wasn't sure he really wanted to broach the subject, but he continued anyway.
"The other day, when you said you were going to face Akatsuki alone," Sasuke fumbled for the words and Naruto sat up, patiently waiting for him to speak. It was rare to see the other man so flustered, and Naruto smirked slightly as Sasuke searched for a way to say what he wanted to say. "Do you really want to dash?" Sasuke stopped, looking uncomfortable, and Naruto decided to put the poor man out of his misery. He knew what Sasuke was trying to ask. "Yes," he said, meeting Sasuke's eyes. "I would like to die." Sasuke sucked in a breath. He hadn't been expecting such a direct answer. "But dash." "Sasuke, I haven't slept more than an hour at a time since I was 17.
Any normal man would be dead already.
If it weren't for Kyuubi's refusal to let me drop dead from exhaustion, I would be. I am slowly losing myself to a demon that will kill everything in its sight if given the chance. I rarely have human contact for fear that somehow people will discover I'm alive. The only company I ever have is from frogs, and even that is rare.
Everyone I know thinks I'm dead.
Do you have any idea what a tired, miserable, and lonely existence I lead? Dying would be a relief I can't even begin to comprehend."
"I know you're alive," Sasuke snapped. "Isn't that enough?"
He had lived through the loss of his friend once, but the idea of trying to do it again was unfathomable.
"You shouldn't know that I'm alive, Sasuke. It's not safe for anyone to know.
That's why I left in the first place.
I can protect myself. Don't act like I'm helpless."
"Who are you to say we can't know you're alive?"
Sasuke said angrily.
"What gives you the right to make that choice for us?" "No one can protect themselves from this," Naruto said.
"This is not some shinobi. This is Kyuubi. That's not the point. You should give us the option."
"Are you afraid we'd choose to leave you alone?
Is that why you ran away?"
"No," Naruto whispered. "I was deathly afraid that for some stupid, stubborn reason, people would choose to stay with me. I cannot watch those important to me die by my hands.
I refuse to do it." Sasuke didn't answer him.
They hadn't noticed, but the morning sun had begun to peer through the window. There was a sound of a knock, and Sasuke went to answer the door, grateful for the distraction.
Neji stood in the hall, fully dressed, including his mask.
"They're coming," he said simply.
Sasuke was instantly sobered by the news. "Shikamaru knows?" Neji nodded. "He's outside now. Gather the rest of the Anbu, we'll meet outside in 5 minutes. Hi, Niji said, disappearing.
Sasuke closed the door, turning to see Naruto, his mask once again in place.
Naruto shrugged. Duty calls.
Sasuke grabbed his fox mask and katana from their position against the wall and secured them into their places.
Let's go end this, he said.
Shikamaru looked towards the hill the village sat next to, watching grimly as figure after figure appeared atop it, silently staring down at them. They had known that Akatsuki was growing in numbers, but none of them had imagined by this much. Shikamaru had some of the best ninjas Konoha had to offer standing with him, but being outnumbered at what he estimated was 15-1 was not encouraging odds. Konoha ninjas were gathered at the bottom of the hill looking up at the vast amount of shinobi above them. Some of Shikamaru's men had been sent to warn the villagers, leading them away from where the battle would take place. Jiraiya suddenly appeared next to Shikamaru, giving the younger man a nod.
Looking further to his left he could see several other shinobi, including Kakashi and Guy, as well as Lee, Sakura, and Ino. Shoji, Kiba, Shino, and Hinata stood in various positions on his right.
With a small smile Shikamaru began to feel more confident. These were excellent ninjas and he would trust his life to any of them. He could think of no better honor than to fight by their sides. With a puff of smoke Sasuke and Naruto appeared in front of him, Tenten, Niji, and 2 other Anbu behind them. They nodded in greeting at Shikamaru, before turning to survey the enemy.
You know, Sasuke, Naruto said. I think I liked Akatsuki better when Itachi was in charge.
They were less destructive, more goal-oriented, and most importantly, much smaller. The Konoha shinobi hadn't been speaking, but at the masked man's words a tense silence overtook them. Everyone, even those who had never met Sasuke, knew of Itachi and the destructive means Sasuke had gone to for revenge. They awaited Sasuke's response in anxiety, wondering if perhaps this masked shinobi would be the first to fall today. The white fox mask slowly turned to the blue-eyed man, who looked steadily at the wooden face. I'm going to beat the shit out of you when this is over, the voice from behind the mask said. The blue eyes twinkled.
Promise?
Yes.
Several shinobi breathed sighs of relief, others shivered at the thought of Uchiha Sasuke's wrath.
Only a select few Jiraiya and Shikamaru, who knew their history, Kakashi and Guy, who understood friendly rivalry, and, of course, Naruto and Sasuke saw the meaning behind the words.
We're both going to survive this. Promise?
Yes. There was a shift at the top of the hill and Orochimaru in Kabuto's body rode into view, standing comfortably on the head of a giant snake. The flashy snake entrance isn't quite as intimidating after you've seen it so many times, Naruto said quietly, rolling of his eyes.
Sasuke nodded in agreement.
Konoha ninjas, Shikamaru said loudly so that all of those under his command could hear him. Our mission is to protect this village and stop Akatsuki, no matter what the cost. What we do today protects Konoha. Konoha. If we fail, this army is headed towards our village.
Protect Konoha.
There was a loud cry of agreement from the shinobi behind him.
Orochimaru laughed, folding his arms across his chest.
With a simple nod to his subordinates, the shinobi at the top of the hill began to charge.
Arming themselves with kunai, shuriken, and other weapons, the ninja of Konoha prepared for battle. Sasuke and the 4 Anbu behind him pulled their katana from their backs.
Naruto noticed that Niji and Tenten had weapons that differed from their comrades. Niji held a long dagger in his hand while Tenten had 2 katana that were shorter than the others. Spinning them once to get a solid grip on them, she made her way quickly to the right flank, followed by Niji. The other 2 Anbu moved to the left, leaving Sasuke and Naruto in the middle. Naruto had never seen Sasuke wield a katana, but he was not surprised at the fluidity and grace of his movements as the first of the enemy reached them and were instantly struck down. Sasuke stabbed one Akatsuki member and, wrenching the katana from the man's abdomen, he spun to strike at another. Naruto didn't have time to admire Sasuke's skills for long, however, for the sheer numbers the Akatsuki possessed had descended upon him and his attention had to be focused on his own battles. Fortunately, Naruto noticed as he ducked a punch aimed for his jaw, the prestige that members of the Akatsuki formerly possessed did not seem to apply to them anymore.
These ninjas were not S-class nin. Many of them weren't even jounin. It appeared that Orochimaru was going for strength in numbers.
With a swift blow to the head with the blunt end of his kunai, the shinobi attacking Naruto fell face first into the grass. Naruto sensed rather than saw the kick coming from behind him and, turning quickly, he grabbed the attacker's ankle. With a sharp downward thrust of his elbow he broke the other man's leg at its joint. Naruto let him go and he toppled over, clutching desperately at his knee, his cries joining in with the yells and screams of others on the hill that had turned into a battlefield. Leaping into the air, Naruto dodged two kunai that had been thrown at him and they embedded into the ground with soft thunks. A fist came at him from nowhere and he blocked it, punching his assailant in the stomach. Shinobi began charging him in pairs. This was ridiculous. Every time one was struck down, three more would take his place. Chancing a glance around, he saw that Konoha's already small force was rapidly declining. Sakura had given up fighting and was now tending to the injured of their side, as were several other medical nins. The Yambu was faring well. Their swords allowed them to kill many enemies with ease and close-range fighting was their specialty. Neji could maneuver easily with his dagger, getting in close to his enemies and cutting off their chakra flow with his free hand or limbs with his dagger. Naruto grimaced as he saw a man on his knees in front of Tenten, remaining absolutely still.
Her twin blades were crossed in front of his neck. Pulling her arms apart quickly, the man's neck was sliced open, blood splattering across her white mask. A flash of pink caught Naruto's eye and he watched Sakura run to Kiba, who had just killed several sword-wielding Akatsuki members, but had sustained a deep wound in his leg for his trouble. Naruto looked to Sasuke and grimly noticed that even he appeared to be struggling with the never-ending onslaught of enemies. No matter how many were killed, more continued coming. They needed more fighters. At this rate, they couldn't possibly win. He tossed a kunai into the heart of an advancing attacker before gritting his teeth. This was most likely going to blow his cover. Between Kakashi's Sharingan, the Hyuga's Byakugan, Kiba's nose, and Sakura's intelligence, he had no doubt someone, if not everyone, would figure him out. But what was the point of protecting them from himself only to let them die in battle? Raising his hands, he crossed two fingers of his right hand vertically over two of his left. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He could hear the pause in the fighting as ally and enemy alike looked around in amazement at the hundreds of masked figures that had appeared in the fray. Using the confusion to his advantage, the Narutos began to attack. The Konoha ninjas recovered from their surprise and resumed fighting with renewed vigor. Several shinobi had to struggle to get their heads back into the battle, however, for they now knew the identity of the masked man. Chapter 7, of Trust. They were winning, Kakashi realized with relief. With the help of several Naruto clones, for there was only one man with the chakra to create this many Kagebunshins, and one look with his Sharingan confirmed that the masked man was indeed Naruto, he and Guy slowly began making their way through the Akatsuki and towards Orochimaru. Pushing the shock and other emotions he felt at the knowledge of Naruto being alive and well into the back of his mind for the time being, he concentrated on the battle at hand. It wouldn't do to get distracted. Orochimaru was strong, but if he worked with Naruto and Guy, perhaps they would be able to defeat him. Guy seemed to read his thoughts, for when the two of them made it through the shinobi that separated them from Orochimaru, they both began to run towards him, the beginnings of Chidori in Kakashi's right palm. They skidded to a stop when one of the Narutos suddenly appeared in front of them, hands raised to stop them. "Naruto, what are you doing?" Kakashi asked, allowing Chidori to fade away. Guy choked in surprise when Kakashi addressed the other man, looking quickly at his masked face for confirmation that this was indeed the boy from 10 years before. If Naruto was surprised that Kakashi had figured him out, he didn't show it. "You should probably stay here, Kakashi-sensei, Guy-sensei." "Why is that?" Kakashi asked, refusing to let his old student stop him from getting to Orochimaru without a good reason. Naruto looked over his shoulder and they followed his gaze, watching as another Naruto seemed to be pleading with Jiraiya, who stood not far from Orochimaru's snake. Ero Sanin is about to do something very stupid. Naruto looked back at them, glancing behind them.
Your old students need some help, he said with a quick nod in the direction they weren't facing before disappearing back into the fight. They turned to see Lee struggling to fight off an extremely large group ninja, protecting Sakura, who was a short distance behind him, working intently on Kiba's leg. Akamaru crouched loyally in front of his owner, trying to take care of anyone who made it past Lee. They quickly went to help, leaving Orochimaru to Jiraiya. Ero Sanin, this is a bad idea, Naruto said as Jiraiya bit his thumb. There are too many people here. Plus, he told me that the next time you summoned him he was going to eat you. Naruto frowned. What the hell did you do? Jiraiya paused for a moment, looking grim. One of his sons was killed, probably by Akatsuki, while gathering information for me. Information on what? Naruto asked. On you. Me? Naruto said, confused. Tsunade and I worry about you, kid. We checked up on you now and then. Naruto stared at him in surprise. He'd just assumed everyone would have moved on when he was gone. The more people he talked to, the more it seemed he had never been more wrong. Naruto smiled under his mask, a warm tingle of happiness filling him. At his distraction, Jiraiya did the hand seals and slammed his palm to the ground. Baka! Naruto said, leaping backwards, warm feeling gone. With a poof of smoke, Naruto found himself next to an extremely large red flipper. The fighting on the hill slowed as the shinobi took in the sight of the gigantic frog that had suddenly appeared. Gamabunta rolled his eyes upwards to see who stood on his head, much as Naruto did when Gamakichi perched on his. When he discovered Jiraiya, Naruto could feel the anger radiate from the frog. Jiraiya! He boomed, the pipe in his mouth bouncing. How dare you summon me after what you have done? His rough tongue flew up to grab the Sannin, but Naruto called to him. Boss! Gamabunta paused, looking down at him and retracting his tongue. What are you doing here, brat? Don't eat the pervert, boss, Naruto said. If anyone killed your son, it was Akatsuki. He pointed to Orochimaru, who was only paying mild attention to them from his snake. Orochimaru is their leader. You should extract your revenge on them. Gamabunta growled at Orochimaru, a surprising noise to hear from a frog. Fine, he said. But I want you with me, not him. I can't, boss, Naruto said, pointing behind him. I'm a little busy at the moment. Gamabunta looked over his shoulder at the battle raging behind him, taking in all the clones. Besides, Ero Sanin is more powerful than me, he said to the frog. Gamabunta snorted. I wouldn't be so sure. Jiraiya looked ready to say something uncouth, but Gamabunta continued. Fine, Jiraiya, let's get this over with. He reached behind him, unsheathing his katana. Boss, try not to crush us down here, Naruto called. Baka, Gamabunta said. I don't put any of my sons in danger. Jiraiya looked around the battlefield for the younger frogs. His eyebrows furrowed in confusion when he didn't spot any. It was when he saw Naruto pat the frog's large flipper fondly before running off into battle that he realized with wide eyes that Gamabunta had been referring to none other than Naruto himself. To be held in such high favor by Gamabunta, what had happened between them over the years? That frog, Sasuke said to the Naruto fighting next to him. Is he the one you summoned when we were young? Blocking a punch and smashing his fist into his opponent's face, Naruto answered. Yeah. That's Gamabunta. If frogs were ninjas, he'd be the Hokage. Sasuke nodded, slicing through an enemy's stomach with a swipe of his katana. When the man fell to the ground in a still heap, Sasuke flicked some blood from his katana with a jerk of his wrist. If either man thought that carrying on a conversation in these conditions was odd, they didn't act like it. Kage Bunshin probably gave you away, Sasuke said, spinning and kicking a man away from him. It was one thing when you did one, but this many is bound to cause some suspicion.
Yeah, Naruto grunted, ducking a punch. I talked to Kakashi, he definitely knows.
It was strange for Sasuke to think that Naruto was in so many places at once. He knew these were clones, but they all communicated as if they were a single person. One was fighting at his side while another was talking to Kakashi, but both knew exactly what was happening on each end.
It must be an incredible task to keep them all straight. So, where's the real you? Sasuke asked, looking through the slits of his Umbu mask to see a Naruto pat Gamabunta on the flipper before jumping back into the battle. With the frog?
The real me does need to handle the most important things, of course, Naruto answered. Orochimaru was growing tired of this battle. He was losing too many men and he was not in the mood to fight Jiraiya and his pet.
His new body was so close, just slightly down the hill.
Most people couldn't tell the difference between the real man and the clones, but he could feel the intoxicating power of Kyuubi in only one of the masked men. He just needed Naruto unconscious. The young man was strong, however, stronger than Orochimaru could have hoped and smarter than he had realized. He'd underestimated him before, this time there would be no mistakes. But as he watched the real Naruto, he realized what his weakness was.
As Jiraiya and Gamabunta prepared to attack him, he made his move.
Lifting his arm, he signaled his men to draw back. They retreated behind him, leaving the Konoha fighters confused. The snake he rode on then drove his thick tail into the ground, the signal for the other giant snake, which had burrowed underground and was lying in wait, to make its move. Several Konoha ninjas were tossed into the air as the snake emerged from the ground in a flurry of earth and rocks. Its fangs were born and it flew directly at its target, who was caught off guard and unable to get away. Sasuke could only watch as the snake came at him with speeds he had no hope of outrunning. He felt a sharp jar and the world titled as he found himself tumbling down the hill. Regaining himself, he rolled to his feet, slightly dazed, before turning to look at the spot he'd been standing in. The Naruto he had been fighting with was there panting, his right hand gripping a kunai that was digging into the snake's nose, looking very small against the large face. One of the snake's sharp fangs was impaled through Naruto's left forearm.
Sasuke waited for the proof of a defeated clone and felt his stomach twist with every second it didn't occur.
Then the familiar popping noise sounded, and he and the other Konoha ninjas watched as the 50 or so remaining clones disappeared. The snake suddenly ripped his fang from Naruto's arm, blood flying through the air as he raised his head, hissing viciously. He snapped his jaws, but before he was able to even think about attacking again, his head had been detached from his body, each part falling heavily to the ground.
Gamabunta now stood between the two pieces of snake, gripping his sword tightly. Sasuke moved swiftly to Naruto, who seemed slightly dizzy.
When he reached him, the other man teetered on his feet and Sasuke quickly sheathed his sword, catching him as he wobbled. Naruto's knees gave out and Sasuke supported his weight, lowering him gently to the ground.
I thought you were with the frog? Sasuke said, amazed to find out that the real Naruto had been by his side the entire battle. You idiot! Why didn't you use a clone to push me out of the way?
I told you, Naruto said, breaths coming heavily.
Important things have to be handled by the real me. Sakura rushed to them.
She had no idea why Akatsuki had stopped fighting, but she wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Most eyes were on the wounded young man, even Jiraiya and Gamabunta's and especially Orochimaru's. The pink-haired medical nin checked his wound first. The thick fang had fractured Naruto's arm when it had impaled him and he was bleeding heavily. Sakura quickly noted his shallow breathing and, moving his head protector just a bit, she felt his forehead for a fever.
He was burning up. The snake must have been poisonous, she said, and Sasuke's hands clenched into angry fists. Sakura leaned over Naruto, placing her hand gently on his covered hair. Do you feel any pain? She paused before finishing the question softly with, Naruto? Sasuke looked at her in surprise. She had finally figured it out. They could see Naruto smile under his mask. You were always too smart for my own good, Sakura-chan. No pain. My arm's gone numb, I think. I can't
can't heal this wound with the poison still in you. Plus, your arm may need surgery if the fang caused the bone to shatter. Then just put a bandage on me and I'll wait until I get back, Naruto said between pants.
His increasingly weak breaths worried her. Sasuke watched as Naruto's eyes began to look distant and unfocused. Naruto, stay awake, he said, shaking his good arm. Two very bad things could happen if Naruto lost consciousness and Sasuke didn't want to witness either one.
Naruto was putting up a valiant fight to stay awake, but his vision was swimming.
He could only vaguely hear Sasuke speaking to him, and as the poison spread through his body, he was becoming numb, so that Sasuke's tight grip on his arm went completely unnoticed. Soon his eyes closed and his body relaxed. Naruto? Sasuke said.
There was no response.
Sakura, we need to get him out of here, Sasuke said, making to scoop the limp man into his arms. No, don't move him. Sakura said, placing a hand over Naruto's chest.
It could move the poison faster through his bloodstream.
Orochimaru stood atop his snake, his mouth curled into a victorious sneer. His hands flew in a flurry of seals.
The snake venom would not affect the body once he had control over it. Sasuke and Sakura moved back slightly as Naruto's unconscious body suddenly arched up from the ground with a gasp as if he'd been kicked. Looking quickly over his shoulder at Orochimaru, Sasuke saw with a sinking heart that only Kabuto's unmoving body lay on the snake's head. Orochimaru's consciousness must have moved, he realized, looking back at Naruto, who was now still.
Orochimaru looked around in confusion.
He had never had this happen when he had entered a body before.
He recognized where he was immediately.
The streets of Konoha didn't look much different than when he had been a child. There was a feel to his surroundings, however, that told him he was not in the real Konoha. A young boy no older than 7 walked past him, a shock of wild bright yellow hair covering his head.
He walked by an alley between 2 stores and suddenly someone spoke.
The voice was deep and Orochimaru could hear the malice in it. Hey, kid, come here, a stocky man said from the shadows, thick black hair falling around his face. The young boy looked at him fearfully, backing away slowly. Respect your elders, you little shit, the man hissed, grabbing him by the wrist and dragging him into the alley. The boy cried out in surprise and fear, but the villagers who heard him turned away, pretending not to.
Orochimaru followed them into the alley, not having anywhere else to go.
The man slapped Naruto across his young whiskered face, the force of the blow sending him sprawling to the ground. Stop your screaming or I'll kill you. The boy quieted immediately. He stifled his cries as the man began to beat him, cursing him and spitting on him. Both Orochimaru and the man watched pitilessly as Naruto sobbed quietly on the ground.
When the man began to unbutton his pants, Orochimaru raised an eyebrow. Now that was interesting. Things like that left deep emotional scars. Naruto had obviously kept up quite the facade when he had been younger. This information could be used to his advantage.
Naruto began to scramble away, terrified. The man advanced steadily towards him. Some skeletons are better left in the closet, a low voice said from behind him. Turning, Orochimaru came face to face with the adult Naruto. He was unmasked and staring calmly at Orochimaru. Kyuubi killed his family, Naruto said, by way of explanation. Behind him Orochimaru could hear the young Naruto's screams. How did it feel? The dark-haired man asked, a malevolent grin spreading across his face. The most painful thing I've ever experienced, Naruto said flatly. With a wave of his hand the screams were silenced and the memory was gone. They stood alone in darkness, only able to see one another. You shouldn't be poking around in my memories. Did no one come to investigate the screams? Orochimaru asked, a small smile on his face. Why should they have? Naruto asked. It was only the demon child. And still, you protect these people. Why? Naruto didn't answer the question, but if it was because he didn't want to or simply couldn't, Orochimaru didn't know.
Konoha doesn't recognize greatness in good, Naruto-kun.
To show your true strength, you must force them to see it. Make them fear you and they will see you and your power. Together we could destroy those who refuse to acknowledge our power.
Naruto gazed steadily at him. You shouldn't be here, Orochimaru. Orochimaru noticed the sudden echo of Naruto's words.
There was a noise of slowly dripping water that sounded loudly throughout the darkness. As his eyes adjusted to the dark, he realized he was in a large dark room made of stone. Get out of here, Kit, a big voice said from the darkness.
I'm not your Kit, stop calling me that, Naruto snapped. There was a snort. You have no power right now.
Tendrils of red chakra were wrapping themselves around Naruto, slowly tightening.
Retreat back to your memories for now, I have things to discuss.
Naruto's fists clenched at his sides as he was rendered motionless.
This is not your decision to make, bastard fox.
The fox didn't answer and Naruto was suddenly tossed backward, disappearing into the blur of color that was his memories speeding by.
The voice spoke, but Orochimaru could not find its source. What are you doing? It asked.
I want to take over Naruto's body, Orochimaru replied, unafraid.
There was a sniff. You smell of evil.
Much more refreshing than the Kit scent.
What do you want with his body? I want power. My power. It was not a question.
You'll have a much freer reign under my control.
I don't mind letting you take over once in a while.
There was a low rumble and it sounded as if the fox were laughing.
See, human, that is where you have misjudged me. I don't plan to be under anyone's control. Kid does not control me.
He fights me with his entire being. For that he has gained my respect, despite my hatred of him.
You are arrogant to assume you could control him, and even more arrogant still to think you could control me.
You are powerful and evil, and perhaps together we could do much damage, but I spent too many years with this brat. I have been slowly merging with him, weakening the seal as the years go on.
I cannot allow you to come in after all this work and ruin it.
When I am free, after destroying those important to the brat, you'll be my next target.
If I could eat you now I would, but I'm not yet free to move around.
Orochimaru finally saw where the voice was coming from as two glowing red eyes came into view, separated from him by a large set of vertical metal bars. The eyes flashed and Orochimaru felt a sharp jolt. When he opened his eyes, he realized he was back in Kabuto's body, lying atop the snake. He angrily climbed to his feet, glaring at Naruto. The fox had not only rejected him, he had threatened to kill him. No matter, the poison would take care of them both anyway. Calling a retreat to his forces, he and the snake he stood on disappeared. They waited with bated breath after Naruto had gone still. If he woke up and was Orochimaru they had to be prepared. After several moments there was a flare of red chakra that suddenly surrounded Naruto's body.
Sasuke and Sakura backed away quickly.
The flare of chakra was a familiar sight to Jiraiya, who had seen a similar occurrence with Sasuke 10 years before. Looking to Kabuto's body he saw it stand.
He smiled. Naruto had fought him off.
Sasuke could feel that Orochimaru was no longer inside Naruto, however he had no time to feel happy. Naruto's eyes had snapped open. They were blood red.
Sakura, get back,
he said, as Naruto began to stand.
Sakura moved away quickly, recognizing the seriousness of her former teammate's voice, and even though his mask covered his expression, Sakura could almost picture the grim set of his jaw as Naruto stood. The Akatsuki was gone, but Shikamaru realized instantly that the threat to their lives was not over. Hinata and Neji were watching with wide pupil-less eyes. The chakra was not normal. They could almost see the anger it radiated.
There was such an abundance of it as well. Fighting Naruto, with their Byakugan it hadn't been difficult to discover who he was, although their emotions at the discovery were another matter entirely. In this state it would be impossible to win, even with everyone working together. The older generation of shinobi stared in horror at the man who now radiated visible red chakra.
They knew exactly who he was now.
They had not felt that chakra for over 25 years, and with this man's apparent death 10 years ago they had believed themselves rid of it for good.
Pulling down Naruto's mask, Kyuubi looked around at all the potential victims with a feral grin, elongated fangs gleaming.
When the mask was removed and the whiskered cheeks shone, anyone who hadn't realized his identity was instantly informed. Kyuubi's red eyes fell on Sasuke and his grin grew wider. "You shall be the first," he said, stalking towards the dark-haired Umbu.
"Naruto," Sasuke said, backing away. "Fight it."
Naruto's face twisted into a sneer.
"He's very tired.
Not sleeping for 10 years will do that to you." Kyuubi crouched, lowering Naruto's center of gravity, preparing to leap at Sasuke. He suddenly stopped, dropping to his knees.
"What?" he said angrily.
A few yards away Shikamaru was on his knees as well, face showing immense strain as he struggled to hold his Kage-main no jutsu on the powerful creature.
"Sasuke, snap him out of it."
"You're the only one who can," he said through gritted teeth and closed eyes.
He didn't even notice Choji and Ino worriedly kneeling at his side. Sasuke moved quickly, dropping to his knees in front of Naruto and pulling his Umbu mask off.
Several ninjas thought getting that close to a demon was a stupid move, but no one dared try to get the Umbu to back away.
"Naruto, you have to fight him," Kyuubi snarled viciously. "I'm not running away, and there's no way I can beat Kyuubi. So, if you don't want me to die you'd better get control, dobe," Sasuke said, repeating the words Naruto had yelled at him 10 years before. Shikamaru's jutsu broke and the young Jounin collapsed, completely drained from his desperate effort.
Ino and Choji caught him before he could fall face first into the ground. The ninjas of Konoha watched in horror as Kyuubi raised a clawed hand to slice through Sasuke, who made no attempt to dodge. Suddenly Kyuubi's eyes flashed and became purple. Sasuke remained where he was, keeping eye contact with the man in front of him. Naruto fell to all fours, his fingers digging into the earth and red chakra still swirling around him.
Shino raised an eyebrow in understanding.
He'd felt this chakra before. This was not the first time Naruto had had to battle with the fox. Suddenly the red chakra was sucked back into Naruto with such force that he was tossed backwards and slid several feet.
Sasuke moved to his side, relieved to be looking down into Blue Eyes.
"That," Naruto panted, looking intently at the man he had almost clawed in half moments before,
"is a dangerous game." "It's a game of trust," Sasuke said with a small smirk. Chapter 8, of Decisions. Sasuke stood nearby as Sakura gently wrapped Naruto's arm.
Blood began seeping through the white bandages as soon as she wrapped them, but there was nothing else to be done. Those who had known Naruto stood around anxiously, not too close, but not very far from him either. Emotions and questions were flashing through their minds as they watched him lying on the ground, struggling for breath. It amazed them, now that the young man's mask was down, that they hadn't recognized him before. He looked almost the same but older. His face was more defined and the marks on his cheeks were somehow whiter, but everything else remained the same, right down to the blue eyes and tan skin. The ninja who hadn't known Naruto, and therefore had hated or feared him, stayed at a distance from him, despite his weakened appearance. Those who weren't wounded helped other medical needs move the injured and dead. "Naruto, you need to get back to Konoha as quickly as possible," Sakura told him when the arm was bandaged. Naruto's eyes were closed, but she knew he was awake.
"I don't have the ingredients to create an antidote." Blue Eyes opened to peer thoughtfully at her. "What happens if it's left untreated?" Sakura looked down at him in confusion.
"You'll die," she said.
"Does it happen quickly?" he asked between breaths.
She didn't understand why he was asking such a question and looked at Sasuke in confusion.
Did Naruto want to die?
Sasuke saw her expression and made to move towards them, but Naruto raised his voice slightly, saying, "This is a conversation between my doctor and I, Sasuke." The dark-haired man froze, before crossing his arms and turning his head away with a humph.
The rest of the friends looked on in confusion. Well, Sakura-chan? Naruto, I don't understand dash.
Just answer me, Naruto said, with a serious tone she'd never heard from him before. Sakura studied him for a moment before complying. The snake venom has 3 phases. The first is what you are in, it causes paralysis. It is slowing down your heart and lungs, which is why you are having trouble breathing.
To be honest, I don't know how you're still conscious. The snake usually eats its prey before this stage is over, but humans have discovered that if the venom remains in the system for more than a couple of hours, the poison begins to react to the blood, giving a person the sensation of being burnt from the inside. Shinobi often uses it for torture. Naruto remained quiet, waiting for her to continue. This can continue for hours before the person dies. I'm sure Tsunade-sama will be able to make the antidote, so if we can just find a way to get you back quickly dash.
I'd rather just stay here, Naruto said, closing his eyes again.
But Naruto, Sakura said. Like hell you are, another voice said. Naruto didn't open his eyes.
Sasuke, I told you to stay out of this.
Sasuke may not have been close enough to hear the conversation, but another advantage the Sharingan gave him was it made it very easy to read lips. Sakura, Sasuke said. See if Jiraiya can get Gamabunta to give Naruto a ride back to Konoha.
Naruto growled, opening his eyes to glare at Sasuke who was standing above him.
This isn't your decision to make, Uchiha.
The sentence lacked much force behind it though, for Naruto was still struggling for air.
Sakura hesitated, but Sasuke glared at her and she quickly stood and went to Jiraiya, leaving the 2 men alone. What the fuck do you think you're doing, Dobe?
Sasuke asked when she left. Nothing that should come as a surprise to you, Naruto wheezed.
Sasuke kneeled next to him, placing his weight on his heels. I'm not going to let you use me as an excuse to kill yourself. I'm not using you as an excuse, I'm using the large snake bite in my arm. You only got bitten because you pushed me out of the way. Would you please drop the self-loathing thing? It's extremely annoying. This is my life, Sasuke. If I want to risk it by keeping you from being eaten, that's my decision.
And if I'd rather stay here than rush back to Konoha on the chance that Tsunade can heal me, that's also my decision.
Sasuke was quiet for a moment, listening to Naruto's unsteady breaths. Finally, he spoke, and if our positions were reversed and I was the one opting to stay rather than go back, what would you do? Naruto sighed. Send you back kicking and screaming. They could hear Sakura returning.
Gamabunta says he can get you back to Konoha in a few hours, she said, nervously awaiting Naruto's reaction.
Well, since that freak of a frog is more stubborn than Sasuke, it looks like I don't have any choice in the matter, Naruto said in a cheerful manner that varied greatly from the serious tone he'd been using with Sasuke only moments before. Disrespectful brat. Gamabunta boomed, extending his tongue to gently pick him up. Sasuke, Naruto said, before it pulled him up. I'm sorry.
Then he was whisked away and laid on the top of Gamabunta's head.
Sorry for what? Sasuke thought in confusion. Was Naruto planning something?
I'm coming with you, Jiraiya said, glaring up at the frog as if daring him to say no.
Gamabunta was not the only one who cared for Naruto as a son. The frog nodded and Jiraiya leapt to his head. Sasuke took a step forward, considering going with them. Naruto's last words left him extremely uneasy.
He paused, feeling a gentle hand on his shoulder. Turning his head, he saw Kakashi standing behind him. Sasuke, he said, with a nod in the direction of Chuji and Ino who were watching what was going on, but kneeling next to an unconscious Shikamaru.
With Shikamaru recovering, we need you here. Sasuke hesitated, looking up at the frog, then back to the leaderless shinobi.
Kakashi was right, he had a duty to the troops.
Gamabunta set off at a high speed, and soon he was out of sight. Sasuke watched them go, regretting his decision almost immediately.
Tsunade may not have looked it, but she was getting too old for this. When Jiraiya arrived on Gamabunta, a writhing Naruto in his arms, she had sprung into action, doing her best to ignore the tightening in her chest. They carried Naruto to a hospital room. She'd lost too many people and grimly vowed Naruto would not be added to that list. The young man was obviously in severe pain. His eyes were clenched tightly and his teeth ground together in an attempt to keep himself from screaming.
Tsunade was surprised he was able to remain conscious. As soon as Jiraiya explained what had happened, Tsunade recognized the snake venom. A lethal poison used mostly for torture. It would figure Orochimaru would have access to such a substance.
The cure for it had only recently been discovered, and fortunately Tsunade had all the ingredients needed to make it. As she injected it into Naruto's arm, she couldn't help but think about how close she had come to having to announce his death.
Again.
Another hour and there would have been nothing she could have done. Thinking about that now would do her no good though. She glanced at Naruto, whose face was angled towards the right so he couldn't see what she was doing. He was extremely quiet and she could only assume he was focusing all of his energy on hiding any indication of being in pain. He had refused to allow her to give him any type of drug before she performed surgery on his wounded arm. He did not want to risk losing consciousness again. Tsunade could only imagine what it felt like to have her poking around in his arm with her metal instruments with nothing to dull the pain. She was impressed though. Naruto managed to remain absolutely still for her. He surprised her when he suddenly spoke, but he'd at least had the intelligence to wait until she had paused her work to ask Shizen for a different instrument.
"Will this take long to heal, Tsunade Baba?" he asked, staring blankly at the white tile wall. The operating room was so boring. It had the dull sterile feel one expected from a hospital and it was doing nothing to distract him from what she was doing to his arm. Tsunade peered at him over her white surgeon's mask. "For a normal person I'd say a month or so, but with your unique healing capabilities probably less than a week." She began probing into his arm again with what looked like a large pair of tweezers. Carefully, she searched for the tiny fragments of bone that had been shattered. "I'm leaving after the surgery," Naruto said resolutely. He'd only stayed for the surgery because Tsunade had warned him that without it his arm would become useless. "What?" Tsunade said, her chocolate eyes looking up from his arm and at his face, which remained averted. "Can't you at least wait a day?
Give yourself a chance to start healing." "No, I need to go as soon as possible," Naruto said firmly. Kyuubi was closer now, his presence buzzing constantly in his mind, an unpleasant reminder of why he'd left in the first place. He also knew he needed to leave before everyone returned. Assuming they remained at the village for the night and headed home this morning, he guessed that they wouldn't be back until the next day. When Gamabunta had brought him in yesterday, Tsunade had given him the antidote and refused to operate on his arm until the morning, to give him a chance to rest. Not that he actually slept, but it had given him a chance to think. Everyone knew now and he did not have the desire nor the strength to handle the questions that would undoubtedly be thrown his way. Then of course there was his biggest problem. Sasuke. He knew, without a doubt, that the dark-haired Umbu would not let him leave easily. Naruto had known he was going to regret coming back. He was getting too close. How many times when he was a kid had he wished Sasuke would acknowledge him as a friend? And now it seemed as though Sasuke genuinely did. But there was a reason ninja so rarely befriended one another. Too many dangers in such actions. Caring about others could be used by the enemy as a weakness. Orochimaru had done it. If he had sent the snake directly at Naruto, he would have dodged. But by sending him at Sasuke, he had ensured that Naruto would take the hit. Caring impairs judgment and distracts on a battlefield. Naruto had to distance himself from Sasuke for both their sakes. He had no particular attachment to his own life. He would gladly give it for Sasuke. He would not, however, allow himself to become Sasuke's weakness. Naruto had been spiraling out of control for years and he would not let Sasuke throw away his life for a hopeless cause such as his own. The path Naruto walked held only one certainty that he could see: death. This was why he needed to be gone before Sasuke returned.
Gone, and far enough that the young Buu couldn't pursue him.
Because Sasuke wouldn't listen to reason, and Sasuke was the only one who could weaken his resolve. Shikamaru was tired. Not the normal tired that accompanied a long day, or the kind of tired he always seemed to feel whenever he had to deal with something troublesome. Shikamaru was weary, and, despite the fact he'd just now floated back to consciousness, he could feel exhaustion threatening to claim him already. As a man who went out of his way to ensure that he didn't exert himself unless absolutely necessary, the effort it required to open his eyes almost didn't seem worth it. However, even in his half-awake state he could sense the presence of many people. It took him several blinks to clear his vision and a few more moments to understand where he was. The feel of the soft mattress under him reminded him he was in his room in the hotel, and from there memories began to resurface. He'd used all of his chakra when holding the Kagemain no Jutsu on Kyuubi. The moment the shadow connected with Naruto he felt the intense power trying to break free. It had knocked him to all fours immediately. After his jutsu broke he'd blacked out, and he only vaguely remembered speaking to Chuji and Ino somewhere between the battlefield and his room. They'd told him Naruto's condition and that he was already headed back to Konoha with Jiraiya.
Is he going to be okay, Sakura? Shikamaru heard a female voice ask. Ino.
Pink hair suddenly filled his vision as Sakura leaned over him, checking on him.
He'll be fine, he just used up all of his chakra, she replied.
Startled green eyes met tired brown ones.
You're awake, Sakura said in surprise, looking down at him. Let me see.
Ino said, and Sakura was suddenly pulled from his line of vision to be replaced with a scowling blonde.
Shikamaru blinked.
He knew that look, but he had no idea what he'd done to piss her off this time.
Why didn't you tell us? She said.
Shikamaru's normally quick mind sluggishly tried to understand her question but was coming up with nothing. Regretting the action the minute he took it, he pushed himself into a sitting position, raising an eyebrow when he saw how many people were crowded into his room. The original Rookie 9, except for Sasuke and Naruto, and Guy's old team was present. He wasn't quite sure how they had all managed to fit into his room. They were all looking at him, waiting for an answer to the question he didn't understand.
Tell you what? He asked. Naruto.
You knew he was alive and didn't tell us.
Ino said angrily.
I knew something weird was going on, Kiba muttered from the chair near Shikamaru's bed. Sakura had managed to heal his leg, but it would be sore for a few days.
Akamaru barked at his feet. Why didn't you tell us, Shikamaru? Chuji asked.
He didn't seem as angry as Ino or some of the others. The poor man just looked confused and upset at the idea of his best friend hiding something from him.
He asked me not to, Shikamaru answered truthfully. Why wouldn't he want us to know? Lee asked.
I don't understand, Hinata said. She had never become any less soft-spoken, so when she talked, the group had learned to quiet down and listen, otherwise no one would hear what the young woman said. She looked tiny standing next to the tall figure of Shino.
Why has he been pretending to be dead?
They were looking to Shikamaru for answers he didn't have.
You have to ask Naruto, he said. Don't give us that ask Naruto bullshit, Kiba snapped. Tell us what you know.
Shikamaru could feel the exhaustion creeping through his body, and all he wanted to do was crawl under the blankets and sleep.
That is all I know, he said. Why did everyone have to be so troublesome?
He hasn't told me anything about where he's been or why he left. When I asked, he told me it was a long story and Sasuke looked ready to throw a kunai into me for even mentioning it. The only thing I can tell you is to go ask Sasuke at this, Kiba snorted, who may or may not know, or wait until we get back and ask Naruto. It seemed obvious that Shikamaru really didn't know any more that they did. He wouldn't deal with the trouble of saying so many words if he were lying. That is, of course, assuming he hasn't died, Sakura said, surprising them all. She was looking coolly at Shikamaru. You should have at least told me, she said.
Don't you think that I had a right to know? Sakura, he said. It wasn't my decision. Even if I had wanted to go against Naruto's wishes, Tsunade-sama forbid me to tell anyone. Sakura didn't appear mollified at his words, but she didn't say anything else. Tsunade? Kiba said. What is this, some huge conspiracy?
Neji had been quietly standing near the door, his umbu mask hanging from his hip.
Shikamaru, what was that red chakra?
Your use of your jutsu this morning indicates that you knew what was going on.
Shikamaru sighed.
Finally, someone asks him a question that he can answer, and it was yet another thing the Hokage had ordered him to never talk about.
I'm sorry, but I can't discuss it with you, he said.
There was a murmur of discontent throughout the room.
Definitely a conspiracy, Kiba said. The journey back to Konoha was very slow and very tense.
What was usually a day's walk would probably take almost 2 since they were slowed by the injured.
Shikamaru observed the returning group with a sigh.
The group of 50 had been reduced to 30, almost half of which had been left injured. They had waited a day before setting out for Konoha, giving both the injured and the healthy a chance to rest before the long walk. After his inquisition, Shikamaru's friends had left, and he had taken advantage of the quiet, sleeping through the day and waking refreshed this morning. His friends knew he knew more than he was telling, and because of this they were giving him the cold shoulder. At times during the walk, he could feel a glare or two directed towards him. They wanted answers, but he was not the one who could give them. Even if he hadn't been ordered not to speak of Kyuubi, he wouldn't have told them. It was Naruto's secret to divulge, no one else. Besides, he had more important things to worry about than getting the silent treatment. Sasuke walked next to him, and for all the calm and poise he outwardly presented, Shikamaru could feel the tension rolling off him in waves.
Sasuke was too busy brooding to pay any attention to Shikamaru. Gamabunta and Jiraiya had left mid-morning yesterday.
If they didn't get to Konoha in time, or Tsunade didn't have the ingredients she needed, Naruto was probably already dead. And it would be his fault.
Again.
If he hadn't frozen up, he may have been able to dodge the snake.
If he had at least tried, Naruto wouldn't have had to push him out of the way. Sasuke heaved a frustrated sigh.
At this pace, they were still almost a day's walk away from Konoha.
Sasuke, Shikamaru said, casting a glance at him. You should go on ahead.
The fox mask turned to him quickly. Tsunade-sama should be informed of the battle and prepared to treat our wounded, Shikamaru said, a hardly noticeable sly gleam in his eyes. He hadn't forgotten that Jiraiya was already at Konoha, and fully capable of informing Tsunade. Behind his mask Sasuke nearly grinned. Shikamaru was giving him an excuse to get back to Konoha as quickly as he could. Without another word Sasuke took off immediately. At full speed he could be back in Konoha in a few hours. The sun had set several hours before and the soft light of the crescent moon shone gently over the group of shinobi. They had stopped earlier in a small clearing of forest that they could all comfortably sleep in. They were close to Konoha now, and those who often ventured from the village had begun to recognize their surroundings. Still, they were far enough away that Shikamaru had opted to allow them all to rest for the night, and the remaining few hours could be walked in the morning. Most of the shinobi were sleeping, save the few who were on guard duty. Kakashi sat high in a tree, leaning against the thick trunk and scanning the forest from his vantage point while absently twirling a kunai between his fingers. He wasn't officially on guard duty, but sleep would not come easily tonight. Naruto's sudden and secretive return was preying on his mind, as was his earlier struggle with the Kyuubi. He couldn't help but wonder if the two were related somehow. There were so many unanswered questions, and until he returned to Konoha, there was no one to answer them. An angry presence suddenly entered his senses, but for all the emotion it gave off, Kakashi could tell it held no harmful intent, so he calmly continued twirling his kunai. Sakura suddenly walked into his line of sight and would have looked like she was taking a normal walk if she wasn't moving sideways up the tree, gravity pulling her long hair towards the ground. Stepping onto the large tree branch he occupied, she took a seat. He kept up his usual nonchalance because he could tell it was comforting to the woman. So many things had changed so quickly that it was nice to know that some things remained constant. Tell me you didn't know, Kakashi-sensei, Sakura said, staring down at the shinobi 50 feet below them.
About Naruto? He asked.
No, Sakura, I had no idea.
How is he still alive? Why didn't he tell us? Her tone became angry. Why would he go to Sasuke? Sasuke almost killed him. Kakashi had always wondered if Sakura had kept her word. Tsunade had told him that in the heat of battle Sakura had told Orochimaru, whom she had thought was Sasuke, that she would never forgive him for Naruto's death. Afterward everyone understood that it hadn't actually been Sasuke who killed Naruto, but they all recognized that Sasuke's decisions had ultimately led to the young man's death. Obviously, no matter how civil Sakura was to her former teammate, she had held to her vow. Kakashi didn't know how to answer her. He had no idea what had transpired between Naruto and Sasuke in their first and second fights. Maybe Sasuke simply found out like Shikamaru. Or maybe what Naruto really needed wasn't a friend, but a little friendly competition, he suggested. Sakura sighed, letting her dangling legs sway back and forth. He'd better be all right, she said solemnly. Then, as if trying to lighten her own mood, she added, because I'm going to give him an earful when we get back. She raised her fist and her eyes flashed. Kakashi's visible light curved into a smile, pleased to see his former student more like her old self. Although, he'd feel bad for Naruto when she got to him. Something told him the younger man was in for quite a few lumps on the head. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.